Hi everyone, it's good to have you join Smart Lesson Nigeria online virtual lesson for today with your regular host, Mr. Otaibe. Your presence in the lesson is appreciated and you are highly welcome. The subject is basic science and the topic is family health 2, environmental sanitation, wastes. Family health 2, environmental sanitation, waste. Remember we said family health is a very wide topic. We have the first symposium, personal cleanliness, and now we have family health 2, which is environmental sanitation. But even at that, environmental sanitation is wide, it's broad, and so we are having sub-symposiums under the environmental sanitation. So the first one is waste, and the second one, like you are going to see in the next lesson, will be methods of waste disposal. And of course, we'll have another one that has to do with effluent treatment and sewage treatment. Yes, all of that will come up as different symposiums under environmental sanitation, forming the second symposium of family health. And so let's kick off right away as we engage the introduction of the lesson that will expose us to the meaning of environmental sanitation in the first place before we start reviewing the meaning of waste and the types of waste that exist in public health. So like you can see, environmental sanitation has to do with keeping our surroundings clean by removing waste and other materials that can cause diseases. And so environmental sanitation involves keeping our surroundings clean by removing waste and other materials that can cause diseases. And so the focus of environmental sanitation is waste removal on the objective of preventing diseases. Yes, waste attract diseases in the form of spreading infections, and so we remove them from our surroundings so that they do not cause diseases. And so the process of removing waste from our surroundings so that they don't spread diseases to us, they don't spread infections to us, we refer to it as environmental sanitation. And it's different from personal cleanliness or personal sanitation. Like we saw, that one has to do with taking care of our body, keeping our body clean, as well as our personal belongings to avoid diseases and infection. But this one, environmental sanitation, is focusing on removing waste from our surroundings, keeping our surroundings clean so that we don't get infections and diseases. And so environmental sanitation focuses on surroundings, our surroundings, whereas personal cleanliness or personal sanitation has to do with the body and our personal belongings. And so we want to take note of all of this. And so we now make progress now to waste. We want to see what wastes are and the types of waste that exist. And so let's review the next slides to see the meaning of waste. Waste are unwanted materials generated from using a product. Yes, unwanted materials generated from using a product are called waste. Yes, unwanted materials you generate from using a product is referred to as we refer to them as waste. So those materials that are not needed, that are not useful again, which you generate from using a given product, we refer to them as waste. Take for example, in the process of using eggs, whether raw or cooked, you generate waste called eggshells. The eggshells are waste generated from using egg. And so that's what we're talking about. And so if you buy food and you use the food and the food was packaged in cellophane or maybe a plastic material, then you generate the cellophane or the plastic material, the nylon as it were, as waste. That's waste. And so the unwanted materials generated from using a product, we refer to them as waste. Waste either contain infectious microorganisms or can attract them to build up in our environment. So it's either the waste you are generating already has microorganism in it, or with time, as the waste are being left, as they are being left, you don't remove them, they attract microorganisms. They cause microorganisms to grow in high population, and the microorganisms cannot spread to humans around, causing infections and diseases. Hence, they must be removed from our surroundings. We must always remove them from our surroundings. Waste go with diseases and infections, and that's why it's advisable we always remove waste from our environment. So we want to take note of this so that we become acquainted with them. So we now come to types of waste. What are the various types of waste that exist? And so let's see the types of waste we have in public health. Now, there are three basic types of waste. They are: one, refuse; number two, sewage; then number three, effluent. And so the three basic types of waste we have include refuse, sewage, and effluent. Refuse, sewage, and effluent. And so refuse, sewage, and effluent are three basic types of waste that exist. But then, what's the difference between them? What is the difference between them? How can we differentiate them? Let's take them one after the other. We'll take refuse first, then at the end of going through the different types of waste, then we'll come to see the difference between them. So we are starting with refuse. Refuse refers to solid waste gathered together. So solid waste that have been gathered together, whether exposed or inside a container, we refer to the solid waste as refuse. So refuse refers to solid waste gathered together. So the key point is solid waste gathered together. And so refuse refers to solid waste gathered together. So the next time you hear of refuse, the first thing that comes to your mind, or the first thing you become conscious of, is solid waste. Refuse is solid waste gathered together. Refuse is generated in the house. It could be generated in the office. It could be in the market or in the industry or even factories. Yes, refuse is generated anywhere, whether in the house, in the office, in the industry, in the factory, or in the markets. We generate refuse everywhere. They are usually generated from using different products associated with life adventures or life endeavors. And so that's that for that. Sometimes the refuse is kept in a container called a refuse bin. So that container, you are putting solid waste, gathering them, waiting for the next disposal or evacuation, is called refuse bin. We call it refuse bin. So the container you put solid waste, that is refuse, to gather them pending when they will be disposed, we refer to the container as refuse bin. Refuse contains microorganisms or attract carriers of microorganisms called vectors. We have microorganisms, that is small organisms that cannot be seen with the unaided eye except with the aid of the microscope. They usually go with refuse. They are present in refuse. And sometimes refuse attract carriers of microorganisms, carriers of pathogens, that is microorganisms that cause diseases. Yes, you see refuse, they attract rodents, they attract insects like cockroach, yes, and sometimes they attract mosquito. Yes, these ones are carriers of pathogens, that is microorganisms that cause diseases. For example, mosquito is a vector of plasmodium, a microorganism that causes bacteria. Yes, and sometimes rodent is a carrier of a virus called Lassa fever virus. And so refuse contains microorganisms, and they also attract things organisms that carry microorganisms, carriers of microorganisms. So organisms which carry microorganisms that cause diseases or which carry pathogens, we refer to them as vector. Vector include mosquito because it carries the pathogen Plasmodium. That's the microorganism that causes that causes malaria. Then again, rodents is also a vector because it carries the pathogen Lassa fever virus. And so that's what we're talking about. So refuse is associated with microorganisms directly or carriers of microorganisms called vectors. Examples of which are rodents, then cockroach, then we have others like mosquito. And so because of that, refuse should always be removed from our surroundings so that they don't bring in these things that can give us diseases or infections. That's why we always evacuate refuse from our surroundings so that these things that go with refuse, talking of microorganisms and carriers of microorganisms, do not come in to give us diseases or infections. And so that's that for that. Now we have a picture of refuse here. You can see solid waste gathered together. In there you have carton as waste from packaging, you have nylon, you have all sorts of materials that have been heaped together. They have been gathered together. So this refuse in an urban setting, you can see this urban metropolitan terrain where the refuse have been heaped in a corner. And so this is a picture of a typical refuse. Solid waste gathered together pending evacuation by possibly waste managers or waste collectors. And so that's that for that. Then we now go to another one. Like that first one we saw, it was exposed. But in especially close to household settings, we usually have refuse kept inside refuse bin. Yes, remember we said earlier that a container where you put refuse to collect them, we refer to them as refuse bin. So this is another setting of refuse, but this one is kept inside the container called refuse bin. So the green container you are seeing that has the refuse inside it is called refuse bin. So this refuse is kept inside refuse bin. And so collection of refuse, take the setting of the refuse is exposed. For example, the setting of refuse collection in markets in villages or poor urban areas. You see refuse being heaped in the front of the market, waiting for waste managers to collect. And that's the exposed refuse, the refuse that is exposed. But usually close to the house, we see refuse being kept in a container, and the container is called refuse bin. And that's what you are seeing in this second picture, showcasing refuse impression, the artistic impression of refuse. And so let's make progress now as we go to the next one, talking of sewage. I want to look at sewage. So what do we mean by sewage? So let's review the slide content so that it will help us to see the meaning of sewage. Sewage is liquid waste that flow through a pipe to a collection point. Yes, liquid waste that flows through a pipe to a collection point is called sewage. And so while refuse is solid and is usually gathered together in a container, sewage is liquid waste that flows through a pipe to a collection point. The collection point could be a treatment plant. That's a machine where the sewage is treated before it's being disposed, or it could be an underground reservoir like we have in undeveloped parts of the world. They will dig the ground, manipulate the excavated hole with concrete, and the sewage will be flowing into it, and the so-called soak away. Yes, soak away. So that one is usually present in underdeveloped countries and and maybe poor rural areas or poor urban areas, and even in some rural areas. We are not talking of pit latrines. Pit latrines is a different thing. Feces and urine enter pit latrine directly, but this one, you have feces and urine generated in the toilet, and the content flows through a pipe to an underground reservoir where it's collected. And in the part of the world where these things exist, they call it sock away in the street term. Yes. So that's what we're talking about. So sewage is liquid waste that flows through a pipe to a collection point. And where is the liquid waste generated? Sewage is usually generated from the toilet, bathroom, and kitchen. Yes, the water you flush to carry feces from the WC in the toilet usually goes to a pipe, and the same water you generate from the kitchen that flows through the basin goes to meet the wastewater from the toilet, and the one you generate from the shower, that's the bathroom, also flows to meet them. All of them combine and flow to an underground reservoir, as in maybe undeveloped countries. But in developed countries, they flow to a collection point in the form of a machine called treatment plant that will refine them. It will change them to either something useful or reduce them to a harmless form before they are being disposed. And so that's what we're talking about. And so sewage is usually generated from the toilets, bathroom, and kitchen. It is a mixture of the water you generate from the toilet, bathroom, and kitchen. And when it's generated, it usually flows through a pipe that carries it to an underground reservoir or to the treatment plant. That pipe is called sewer. So sewer is the pipe that sewage flows through to a collection point or to a treatment plant. Sewage contains basically feces and urine. The basic content of sewage is feces and urine. That's the major content of sewage. Sewage has many infectious microorganisms. Hence, sewage should be removed regularly from our surroundings. So you see that it goes with infection. It goes with microorganisms, pathogens that can give us diseases. And so that's why it's related to environmental sanitation. Yes, we evacuate them so that the microorganisms and pathogens in the sewage cannot get to us to infect us and give us disease or infections. So that's that for that. Now, we want to have an artistic impression of what we're talking about. Now, you have a structure here. This facility is the so-called sock away in undeveloped parts of the world or local urban areas and some rural areas. Yes, they dig a pit, they dig a hole, manipulate it with concrete, and they now connect pipe coming from the toilet, pipe coming from the kitchen, pipes coming from the bathroom to the underground reservoir, so that it will be collecting the sewage coming from these areas. And as the sewage is retained in the underground reservoir, it leaks downward. To join the underground water. But before it gets to the underground water, is purified. So it does not necessarily contaminate underground water that we pump by borehole machines. And so the sewage is collected underground, and from there it leaks gradually to enter the soil to eventually join the underground water. But before then, it's purified to remove the infections and other contaminants. And so that's that for that. So this is a typical sewage reservoir that is called sock away in poor urban areas, undeveloped countries, and some rural areas. You can see the pipes coming from the house from different areas. You can see the one from the kitchen, you can see the one from the toilet, and the one from other sources. All of them are converging All of them are joining to form a single pipe that is entering the so-called soakaway, that is the underground reservoir. And so when you flush your feces in the toilet and urine, when you generate water from the kitchen from washing, and when you bathe in the shower, all the water flows to meet in a sewer that will now channel the sewage collection into the underground reservoir. And so that's that for that. And so we want to take note of that. So we now come to effluent. Effluent. So what's effluent and how is it different from the ones we've seen so far? Effluent is liquid waste that flow into a river or a sea. You can see the difference. It's just like sewage, but the difference now is that it flows into the sea or river, not into an underground reservoir or a collection point. That's what we're talking about. And so effluent is liquid waste that flow into a river or sea. The flow could be direct or indirect. For poor environmental conditions, you see people flow the effluent into the river or sea directly. But for standard management, the effluent is arrested by a machine called effluent treatment plant that will help to handle it. It will change it to a less harmful form before going to the river or before going to the sea. And so that's that for that. Where is effluent generated? Is it the house? No. Effluent is usually generated in factories. Factories. Yes, factories and industries. From refining, processing, and manufacturing activities. And so when you hear of effluent, your mind should go to factory or industries where refining takes place, where processing takes place, where manufacturing takes place. And you know, most processing, refining, and manufacturing usually involve water. So the wastewater from the process usually is channeled into a nearby river or sea for disposal. That's what we call effluent. And so we want to take note of that. Hence, they usually contain different chemical substances. So in addition to the fact that they may have microorganisms in them, they have different chemical substances in them. The chemical substances could be pesticide, herbicide, fertilizer contents. You could also have heavy metals and other toxic chemicals associated with industrial processing. And so that's that for that. Effluent can contain sewage. Yes, we can have effluent that contains sewage. If you are flushing feces and urine from the toilet, if you are flushing or flowing feces and urine or wastewater from the bathroom directly into the sea or into a river, instead of having a reservoir that collects it, is called effluent. So that means sewage can actually be an effluent. Sewage is effluent that flows to the river or sea directly instead of being collected in a reservoir. I want to take note of that. And such effluent is called sewage effluent. And so when you flush your toilet, when you generate water from the bathroom or from the kitchen and they flow in a pipe straight to a river, straight to a sea, instead of being collected by a reservoir that will treat it or that will collect it for natural manipulation, then the sewage is now an effluent. So that means effluent can take the form of sewage. Sewage flushed directly into the sea or river, and such effluent is called sewage effluent. Effluent contains infectious microorganisms and harmful chemicals that cause disease. We said that earlier. Yes, that cause diseases. Hence, effluent should be handled in ways that humans are not exposed to diseases. So we manage effluent in such a way that humans around cannot be infected or are not infected by the effluent, because effluent usually, even if it's not infected, talking of the microorganisms, the toxic chemicals, they should be managed in a way that these toxic chemicals in the effluent do not get to humans around to cause diseases in them. And so we want to take note of that. Let's see an artistic impression of effluent so that we'll understand better what we've seen. So you can see the wastewater being flushed into the sea, yes, into the water body. This is a typical effluent. This effluent being flushed into the river, and you can see the sewer channeling the effluent into the river. And so this river or sea, that's what we're talking about. And so it's changing the color of the water body, it's changing the color of the river or the ocean. It's making it black instead of translucent or transparent. And so that's that for that. This possibly is associated with a company that refines crude oil. Yes, you can see the dark nature of the effluent, possibly because of crude oil effluent. Or it could be that the company processes something related to lead. Lead is dark in color, and so these materials help to impart the dark color on the effluent, and it's being flushed to the river. So these effluent. But we can also have effluent in the form of sewage. See this other picture. You see this effluent in the form of sewage that is supposed to be flushed into the so-called soak away or underground reservoir, or to a machine that will refine it, a treatment plant that will refine it. Is channeling it into river directly. Yes, in that case, the sewage is called effluent. Any liquid waste you channel to the river or ocean directly is called effluent. Being it feces and urine or chemical substances that have been generated as waste from industrial processing. So this picture is impressing what we call sewage effluent containing sewage. And so we want to take note of that. And so let's make progress now to the next section of the lesson, talking of biodegradable waste and non-biodegradable waste. Biodegradable waste and non-biodegradable waste. So what are biodegradable waste and non-biodegradable waste? Let's review them so that we'll come to know what they are. Biodegradable waste are waste materials that can decay in the soil to disappear after some time. Waste materials that can decay in the soil. Waste materials such that when you dispose them, they can decay in the soil to disappear after some time. We refer to them as biodegradable waste. So biodegradable, that can be degraded by living things, can be broken down by living things to products that can eventually disappear. We refer to them as biodegradable waste. So waste materials that can be broken down by microorganisms in the soil, thus helping to clear them off the environment, we refer to them as biodegradable waste. They are waste materials that can be broken down by microorganisms and thus get cleared off the environment after some time. We refer to these as biodegradable waste. Biodegradable waste materials include wood, paper, soap, clothes, food, sewage, talking of feces and urine, and we also have fertilizers and manure. So they include wood, paper, soap, clothes, food, sewage, whether feces or urine, fertilizers, manure. These things, when you dispose them in the soil, they get decomposed after some time. They get decomposed and you will not see them again. We refer to them as biodegradable waste. They are biodegradable waste. So these are biodegradable waste materials. Then we now come to an artistic impression of it. You can see this container is having waste materials from animal and plant source. Yes, you can see them, fruits and others. When you dispose them, they get decomposed in the soil and get cleared off. So we can refer to them as biodegradable waste. So this container is carrying biodegradable waste, and by the time you release it to the environment, they get decomposed in the soil and get cleared off. You will not see them again. Then what of the opposite? Non-biodegradable waste. Now, non-biodegradable waste are waste materials that cannot decay in the soil to disappear after some times. They cannot decay in the soil. They cannot be decomposed by microorganisms. Microorganisms cannot break them down, cannot digest them to get disappeared after some time. They are waste materials that cannot be decomposed by microorganisms to get cleared off. Hence, they remain in the soil environment for a long time. They persist in the soil. They will be there for a long time. Examples of non-biodegradable waste materials are glass. When you dispose them, they remain in the soil for a long time. Bottles, plastics, nylons, metals, pesticide, fibers, electronic waste like TV gadget that you have disposed. CD plates, we refer to them as electronic waste. E-waste mean electronic waste. E-waste mean electronic waste. Then we have artificial rubber. Yes, artificial rubber. That's synthetic rubber. All of them are non-biodegradable. Microorganisms cannot break them down to clear them off the environment. So they persist in the environment. We want to see an artistic impression to that effect. Now, this is non-biodegradable waste. This container is carrying things like metal cans, yes, rubbers and plastic materials. By the time you release them to the environment, they persist in the soil to destroy the soil. They don't decompose. They are non-biodegradable waste. So we want to take note of all of this. And so that's the size of the lesson. Thank you so much for being present on the evaluation stage. Now you are recommended to log on to take your CBT assessment that will help to drill you on the various points we've exposed in the lesson so that they will sink down in you and become part of you permanently. And so I'll see you again in the next lesson series. Let's make time together to learn something new on a different subject platform.